Here's the deal. We're going to be discussing some adult subject matter right now. So if you have a child or a young person in the room, maybe this isn't suitable for, it's a great time to grab a coloring book, grab some crayons and put them in the other room, because once again, this is going to be an adult discussion this morning, so not really suitable for children. Okay, so there's a new trend that's apparently showing up on tablets and e-readers all over the place, and it's called female erotica. It's basically romantic fiction novels that are really seeing a rebirth right now, and a lot of women especially are crediting them with spicing up their sex lives. So we have a panel of experts here this morning to discuss this. We're going to start first with, we have Dr. Fertility Specialist and Dr. Samuel Wood right here. Then we also have Dr. Rose Hartzell, sex therapist at Alvarado Hospital. Next, we have a couple of erotic fiction novelists joining us this morning. First, we have Sylvia Day, whose new book is called Bared to You, a Crossfire novel. And then we have C.J. Ellison, whose new book is called Big Game. Okay, let's start first with you, ladies. Sylvia, we'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about this trend and why we're seeing sort of a rebirth with it.
Well, erotic fiction has actually been very popular for a long time. I've been writing it since 2005. I just think that this particular trend is hitting the media for the first time, so it's reaching a more widestream audience. But there are a lot of authors who are on the New York Times bestseller list who write erotic fiction.
And CJ, we're looking at a couple of pictures of your novels right now, and we noticed Fabio on the screen behind us here. For people that aren't familiar, what exactly is this? Break it down in basic terms.
You know, when you're looking at the covers here and you see the man in the upper right corner with the flowing hair, that's Fabio. Fabio was terrifically huge in the 80s with romance novels. Now we have Jimmy Thomas, who has been on, you know, I think 7 or 8 times as many covers as Fabio was ever on. He's a brunette, hunky man with lots of ripping muscles and very good looking. But
yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Hartzell, tell me if you would, what is the most common sort of fantasy that you see that a lot of women especially have?
Every woman is different, and I think that's what makes being a sex therapist so difficult, or a sexual medicine physician like Dr. Wood, in that each woman has a different idea of what they are drawn to. And one theme that we're going to be talking about in terms of one of the books is BDSM, which is also a very prominent theme.
Yeah, and Dr. Wood, I wanted to ask you, what exactly is this BDSM? Kind of explain it and its popularity in careful terms, I guess.
Yes, in careful terms. Well, I've been a sexual medicine specialist for about 20 years, and for me there's no doubt about the number one fantasy among women, and that is being submissive. It's BDSM. And that's why I think this book, 50 Shades of Grey, has been so popular, because it taps in to the most compelling fantasy that most women have. Obviously, there's a great deal of variation in that.
Sylvia, tell me if you would how you got into this and how you started writing.
Well, like most writers, I write what I want to read. And I think that the psychological development of a relationship is very dependent on the sexual relationship between the two characters, and really exploring that. For some characters, the only way that they can really communicate with each other is physically. They can't express themselves any other way, and I find that very fascinating, and I love writing about that.
CJ, I'd love for you to answer the same question, how you got into this.
I was a realtor and a property manager, and I got sick, couldn't work anymore. I was going absolutely crazy, so I decided I would try writing. I had a best friend who was an editor. She read my work and said, "You're a natural," and gave me a lot of encouragement and support to get my first book published and to get my work out there.
Doctors, I'm curious, is there a drawback to this? A lot of women, especially living in a fantasy world and not dealing with what's real and what's in front of them. Does that happen?
Well, I think the problem is not the fantasy world, but the real world. When we consider that 48 million women report that they have a sexual dysfunction, that's telling us they don't like what's going on in the bedroom. And one of the things my patients have told me about this 50 Shades of Grey is maybe someone's going to listen now. Maybe someone is going to be interested in what turns us on, not just what turns them on. So I think it is very positive.
Tell me a little more about this 50 Shades of Grey.
It's a book in which there is a dominant male who's a handsome, dashing, wealthy, let's travel the world, let's do anything you want to do kind of guy. And then there's a young female who is a virgin and who learns about sex through the BDSM.
Gotcha.
So it involves things like bondage and whipping and things like that. So it's a little off mainstream, except when you look at what women's fantasies are, that's very mainstream for them.
Dr. Hartzell, do you think there are any drawbacks of the fantasy?
I would have to agree that there is very many positives that can help arouse women. It can be used as a transition from maybe washing the dishes to actually getting to sex. But I also think that it needs to be taken into perspective. So just like men who watch pornography on the internet and see a double D size 0 woman and then go to their wife and see an average sized woman, I think that women are going to need to keep into perspective that, you know, Fabio isn't their husband, and but on the other hand, it can also be, so if you keep it into perspective, I think it could be very beneficial for women in relationships.
Yeah, she's exactly right. I mean, you can take it too far, but what I'm hearing from women is I read these books, and for the first time in months, I really want to have sex with my partner. So it has a general stimulating effect for those that don't go too far into the fantasy land of the details of the novel.
And that leads right into my next question. Sylvia, I wanted to ask you what kind of feedback that you all are getting from this.
Well, readers have been telling me for years that it helps them, it serves as somewhat of a foreplay in their relationships with their spouses. I have a lot of male fans who don't actually read the books. They purchase the books for their significant others because it opens that door for them. It eases the way into having a healthy sexual relationship. And for some women, because the books explore alternative lifestyles and maybe some things that they really don't want to explore without some guidance, the books can serve as that open door to communication between them with, you know, I just read this, it sounds really interesting, you know, would you try this with me?
Right. CJ, lastly, we just have about 15 seconds left or so. Some people call this mommy porn. Do you think it is?
No, I do not think that it's mommy porn. I think that's a really sad way to call it. I think that readers who are reading erotic fiction are not in the same category as men who are watching a lot of pornography. I think in the sense that you can't compare it because this is the written word, this is visual, this is in their mind, this is not acted out on a screen. This is a foreplay that's done ahead of time to gear them up and to intrigue the best part of the brain, the most sexual part of it. Most sexual organ is your brain. So to be able to engage that with your partner through reading is not the same as having something visually stimulating you in the room.
Thank you all so much for being here. Fascinating stuff. We really, really appreciate it. And if you'd like to get in touch with any of our panel members today, all you have to do is go to our website, fox5sandiego.com, and click on that Scene On tab. Okay, Paul Bloom, back over to you.
Thank you all. Still ahead on Fox 5 this morning, we're learning more.